biography, memory, and the writing of contemporary history.
ಇದು ಸಾಧ್ಯವಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸುಗತಾ ಶ್ರೀನಿವಾಸ್ ರಾಜು ಅವರೊಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ವಿಖರ್ ಅಹಮದ್ ಸಯೀದ್ ಅವರು ಇದನ್ನ ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ತಮ್ಮ ಚಪ್ಪಾಳೆಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ ನಾವು ಸ್ವಾಗತಿಸೋಣ. ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟಿಂಗ್ ಬೈ ಆರ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ನರ್ ಹರಿವು ಕ್ರಿಯೇಷನ್ಸ್.
Hello, good morning everyone. Thank you for coming to this event. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be in conversation with Sugata, my senior peer in journalism. If I've been known to ramble, so I jotted down a few points and I'd like to read these out. It'll take me a few minutes, but it'll provide a good background for our conversation. I have known Sugata from the time I became a journalist 17 years ago. Sugata was in Outlook at that time, and as a young journalist, I used to follow his work meticulously. Often when I thought that I was working on an enterprising exclusive story, I would later realize that Sugata had already worked on it, which was quite a bummer for me. Yeah. We kept in touch as he later became the editor of 2 leading Kannada broadsheets and headed a prominent news channels. By this time, I'd read 2 of his books, Keeping Faith with the Mother Tongue and Pickles from Home, the words of a bilingual. A great deal of the material for those early books was based on his journalism. But Sugata's strength lay in providing a deeper layer of meaning in these essays, drawing from his wide readings of literature and history, his understanding of the importance of culture. A lot of us tend to forget that, His attempt at looking beyond ideological constraints, which is always tough for people to do, and his anchoring in the bilingual world of Kannada and English. For any journalist, this output would have been remarkable and would have been sufficient to ensure some kind of immortality along with the tag of a scholar. But as many of us would realize later, this was just the beginning. A few years later, Sugata had forsaken the hurly-burly grind of daily journalism to begin his work on the biography of Devegowda. I recall that we had a conversation, and then Sugata told me, "All I want to do is write books, Vikhar, that's all." I still recall the certitude of that statement. And having read his past 3 books carefully, I must say that you have redeemed that covenant that you made with yourself, Sugata. A lot of people can't say that, but the way, the spectacular way in which you have done it is remarkable. The sheer number of words that you write daily is phenomenal, and this includes your political columns for 2 prominent English broadsheets. It's a great honor that someone of your intellectual caliber resides in Bangalore, If we leave aside the early collections of essays which are noteworthy on their own and have acquired great value for their contemporary insights, some in the audience may be familiar with the recent 3 books that Sugata has published over the past 4 years. The first one was the biography of former Prime Minister H.D. Devegowda, titled Furrows in the Field, the Unexplored Life of H.D. Devegowda, which tenaciously resurrected the life and legacy of the former PM who was not given his due. In this, Sugata's efforts were concentrated intensively on constructing the architecture of Devegowda's life. And for me personally, as a reporter in Karnataka, the book was valuable as this deep, exhaustive exploration provided an overview of Karnataka's political history. Because Devegowda's political career is coterminous with the political trajectory of Karnataka. His book on Rahul Gandhi, Strange Burdens, was novel in its methodology and was a ruminative, book-length political commentary on the politics and persona of Gandhi. The analytical method of Srinivasaraju in this book is interesting as he does not rely or claim access to some private sources like other journalists do. Instead, he thoroughly dissects and scrutinizes everything that is in the public domain. The book was audacious, as it was not a book of reportage, but it was an extended exegesis of a public personality. His latest book is titled The Conscience Network, a chronicle of resistance to a dictatorship. I've been reading that over the past few days. I just finished reading it late last night. It's a fantastic book. I mean, many other adjectives come to mind, but as a non-fiction narrative, it's an extremely powerful book. If his past two books were on prominent public figures, this doorstopper of a book, it's more than 500 words, 500 pages, is not about a powerful political figure, but is about how a group of feisty young men and women built a network of resistance because their conscience compelled them to challenge the might of a dictatorship, despite the grievous price that they would have to pay for this. The resistance movement was attempting to find a sliver of light in the massive shadow that Indira Gandhi had cast. Considering the impact of the emergency and the resistance to it, Sugata chose to pick up a slice of it in distant America and write a fantastic book about this saga of which most of us were ignorant. I was certainly ignorant about this. And as a journalist, as a writer, what was significant for me was that the methodology of all these three books was significantly different from each other. Right? So that will be my first question then. When you set out to write a book, right, are you conscious that I'm going to choose a particular method? Because with Deve Gowda, you were intensively focused on ferreting out material about this one person. So all your energies were on building this biography. With Rahul Gandhi, which I don't know which among your three books, I think that's the most interesting book in terms of the way you've written it. Right? And with this new book, again, you've sort of switched methods. The cast is wider, the sources are scattered, right? And this is not about a prominent person, but in sort of, I mean, to draw from your Rahul Gandhi book, they were karmically connected somehow. So yeah, so when you start writing a book, or do you or when you contemplate, a large body of writing, what is your method?
Thank you, Vikhar. You've been excessively generous. I have to first thank you for that. And you've been a fantastic journalist yourself. So, peer to peer, I think when it comes from you, I am far more, it makes me far more happy, I should say. I do cringe because you are so generous with your appreciation of my books.
No, I'm being very sincere.
No, I mean, as a
and I understand when you say from a peer, I'm honored that you recognize me as a peer.
You're a fantastic
but I sort of I wonder whether I'd be able to ever write so much.
No. I mean, you've been doing significant long form journalism, which I have been reading, and let me admit, I've been also learning from that. So we have worked side by side in Karnataka, and I'm sure you will be writing fantastic books going forward. But the first question that you asked me about methodology, it's something that I've not been very conscious about. See, when you look at I'm not someone who goes with a certain kind of prejudice into a book. I don't try to, prejudge somebody or something. So that is the reason why all my writing has been a bit of narrative history, right? So I don't prejudge, and say, okay, let me do this for this book. So I wait until the material starts speaking to me. For example, with the Deve Gowda book, I had to look at the kind of archival material that existed about Deve Gowda. For instance, the kind of material that was available in Bangladesh, or in the Northeast, or in Kashmir, or in say Gujarat or Madhya Pradesh or wherever that Deve Gowda had worked. When that material came before you, and you are not myopic where you're looking at just somebody's caste, somebody's English, somebody's accent. It's a very I would say a very narrow way of looking at something. So I just waited for material, say in the Nehru Memorial Library or the Cabinet Notes or the National Archives. When I started looking at the kind of material that there was, I immediately understood one thing, that this man had been treated with extraordinary prejudice. And then I started asking myself, this is my academic training. Why could that kind of prejudice why was there that prejudice? Was it because of caste elements, or was it because of class elements, or was it because of his inability to be in power for a long duration? Because my one thing has been very certain in my thinking, which is that any kind of history that you leave behind, the legacy that you leave behind, any kind of remembrance that you try to create for yourself, happens with this invisible scaffolding of power, executive power. And whoever in contemporary Indian history has had the longer durations, has held power, executive power for longer durations, have been able to create greater remembrance for themselves. So obviously, a VP Singh or a Gujral or a Deve Gowda or a Charan Singh or a Morarji Desai have their legacies have made to look like it's been ridiculous. See, you can have difference of opinion with those people. You may not agree with their political ideology, but you cannot just dismiss them as some kind of village bumpkins or someone obsessed with something else. All said and done, they were there in the political stream for 4 decades, 5 decades. And this was their pinnacle movement, becoming prime minister. And they did not get there just by, loitering around or being village bumpkins. In fact, I was damn surprised. I was really surprised when I read the oral history interviews of Jyoti Basu in the Nehru Memorial Library and Museum, which has now become PMML. It's no longer Nehru Memorial Library. So when I read that, I realized it was not Deve Gowda who wanted to be prime minister. It was the left which wanted to make him prime minister. And Jyoti Basu's idea of making him prime minister was because he said that the left has had to forego its opportunity. I am not becoming prime minister, but somebody who becomes prime minister will have to become prime minister with our support, and we better put a proper person there. And that proper person, the interpretation of proper person in Jyoti Basu's imagination, was someone who knew administration well. And Jyoti Basu had observed Deve Gowda and his style of administration, his ability to create, huge projects, his technical ability, all of that for not just 1 year or 2 years, but for 20, 30 years. In fact, I write about, I don't know if you remember that thing, the first time Jyoti Basu and Deve Gowda meet, they meet in Guwahati. He has gone for a conference of opposition leaders. Now we speak so much of these opposition leader congregations. So Deve Gowda has gone there. He is sitting in one of the last rows, shy and not knowing anybody. This is 70s. On the stage is Jyoti Basu, Jyotirmoy Boshu, and a few others. And the keynote is being, I think, delivered by Jyotirmoy Boshu. I read that, and that is when I realized that this man, had come in contact with these people much earlier. And there he says, all of you are opposition leaders in your respective assemblies. But if you don't learn to work like that fellow in Karnataka who has taken on Devraj Aras, I don't think you guys are going to ever succeed. And they get his name wrong. They call him some, like, the North Indians or Bengalis or whatever, don't get the name Gowda, they can't pronounce it correctly. They say they Gowda or something like that. And the audience claps. After the session is over, Deve Gowda shyly goes and introduces himself that I am the person that you mentioned. I've actually come to the conference. So they give him a standing ovation in the next session, saying that this man has shaken the mighty Devraj Aras, throwing at him files every day, throwing at him data every day, breaking a scam a day. And that's how an opposition leader should function. So it's an irony of ironies that Deve Gowda, in his 7 decades of politics, spent only 6.5 to 7 years in executive power. He lost power very soon. It could be as minister where he resigned himself, or chief minister or prime minister. But for 70 years, for 60 years or 65 years, he had been in the opposition and had never been irrelevant in Indian politics. If you look at what Chaudhry Charan Singh spoke about him, if you look at how Morarji was his mentor, nobody knew about it until I wrote that entire chapter on Morarji Desai and Deve Gowda. Deve Gowda was not someone who was going to others to get mentored. It was Morarji. And Morarji, please know, gets dismissed for all small things, that he used to drink this and that. That was the kind of canard that the party in power used to build against everybody else. In fact, last year, I think it was at a lit fest like this, where I was asked, is it fair that Mr. Rahul Gandhi is called a Pappu? This was at the Bangalore Lit Fest, when my Rahul Gandhi book came out. So I had to tell them that I'm not someone who approves any kind of name calling of anybody. And he's certainly not a Pappu, because he's a very intelligent man. He knows his stuff. You may not agree with the way he presents it, or he may not have a few other things which make him interesting. But the Congress party, for the longest period of its existence, made every other leader who were opposed to it a Pappu. For instance, Devi Lal was not a Pappu. He was a mass leader. Lallu Prasad Yadav was not a Pappu. Chaudhry Charan Singh was not a Pappu. Mayawati was not a Pappu. Mulayam Singh Yadav was not a Pappu. Deve Gowda was a class apart from all these people, because besides being a mass leader, he also was an engineer prime minister, which nobody mentioned. Because if you go to Assam and look at how the Bogibeel bridge was designed, it was courtesy Deve Gowda's technical finesse. Or if you look at how the Faraka Treaty, for which he is one of the most adored personalities in Bangladesh. Forget India, Bangladesh. He changed the politics of not just Karnataka, he changed the politics of Bangladesh, which is acknowledged by Sheikh Hasina. And these are things which, when you look at material, your methodology is decided by the material on hand. Similarly, Rahul Gandhi did not have archival papers. So the first thing that came to my mind was that I cannot write a book on Rahul Gandhi like I wrote a book on Deve Gowda.
Of course.
And he had spoken a lot, but it was too close to history. And in Deve Gowda's case, I stopped at 2000 because I needed that 25 years of distance to write about him. And so I thought, let me do what the New Yorker does, which is write a long essay, critical essay, and probably psychoanalyze him a little bit. Of course, I don't know the tools of psychoanalysis, but it is not pop psychology either, but trying to understand. But there's another way of doing it, which is being empathetic. So I put myself in his shoe. What happens to a boy who's caged for all his life? What happens to a boy whose playmates are his security men? What happens to a boy whose security men, who has been playing with every day, go and assassinate his grandmother? So what has happened to his psyche over his 50 years? He's slightly older to me, I think a year and a half. But what is it that has changed him? Why is his politics so very different from all that you know about politics in India? So that was the primary question. That question led me to a certain methodology.
Correct.
And then now coming to the Conscience Network, the latest book. See, that again, I stumbled upon something in the New York Times archives initially, and then I recognized a few names. I went back and asked them, do you remember that you did these things? And one of them was S.R. Hiremat, the other one was Professor Anand Kumar, Ravi Chopra. They just brushed it aside. They said, yeah, we did a few things as young people in America, but we don't keep any archives. But that got me interested. I wanted to go and see what was it that they were publishing, what was it that they were writing at that time, the pamphlets that they were writing, how did they organize themselves. The curiosity came because in March of 1976, the New York Times had an entire page on the organization they had built. And that was fabulous. A New York Times writing about how this particular group of Indians had become the primary resistance against Indira Gandhi's emergency globally, not just America. They had built networks across.
The Indians for Democracy.
Indians for Democracy. So that curiosity took me to Swarthmore, examined the Quaker papers, took me to Princeton, looking at, chasing some private papers. Then it took me to Las Vegas. It took me to, again, Swarthmore, where Paula Bronstein, who was refusing to talk to me. This is a fantastic lady who had married a Odia person. And of course, he had been jailed during the emergency with the allegation of being, under Misa, of being a CIA agent. And this lady, an American lady, had tried to get her husband released. She had failed. She had gone back to America and built an entire church network to create awareness about him. So she was refusing to talk because she had separated, she had moved on in life, and she didn't want to, revisit her life 50 years later. But then, usual journalistic persuasion, writing letters every other week and then telling her that this is going to do this, you owe it to history, you are such a marvelous person, and all that. And 3 months later, she relented. She said, when can you come to Swarthmore?
And I read that chapter.
Yes.
I mean, the tenacious way in which you persuaded her
Yes.
has revealed so much material.
Yeah.
In Cuttack.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
her sort of fearful existence after the
Yes.
arrest of her husband. And her tortuous journeys to Calcutta, raising a small 5-year-old child.
Yes.
During this time without any support. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that lady, was fantastic because none of the Indians, like all Indians, don't keep their material safe. They just had, Hiremat had nothing. Anand Kumar had some scattered papers. Ravi Chopra just, lifted his hand.
You keep talking about the IFD archive.
Yes. No, IFD archives is a collection of all these people who, like D.C. Agarwal, had a few things in his collection, which was about the papers that, there was a route map that they had created for a human rights walk.
I think this is the right time. I mean, this is serendipitous that you mentioned D.C. Agarwal and his notes.
Yeah.
Because I love these 2 paragraphs that you wrote about D.C. Agarwal. This is after the 30th June 1976 protest in Washington. D.C. Agarwal still preserves in his files the notes he had made for his maiden press conference on a crumpled sheet of paper. It was a kind of memorabilia that stayed with him for decades, along with other papers. He knew it had no larger meaning outside of himself, yet he had never discarded it. Perhaps he thought that the sheet of paper bore witness to his life's unusual alignment with a larger historical happening. It was testimony to a larger purpose he had given himself in his younger days, outside the boredom of everyday living and his professional exigencies. One wonders if people preserve their old notes, cards, and letters in the forgotten corners of their desks, cupboards, basements, lofts, and garages because they want them from time to time to authenticate their own lives for an autobiography they are constantly revisiting in the attics of their mind, an autobiography that they construct for an audience of one themselves, an enterprise that quietly validates the significance of their life and living, something that echoes in soulful chambers within, that their journey was, after all, not frittered away. Notes to oneself and other such material, perhaps, are private archives for amorphous chapters of such a deep human need. It almost sounds like it's out of a very well regarded literature book, but it is a book of narrative non-fiction. I just,
That, I mean, I should tell you, I took a Amtrak train to Princeton to see DC Agarwal without knowing what he may have with him. And lo and behold, and as really surprised, I was to take a taxi from the railway station to his home. And but then I saw somebody on the platform, and it was DC Agarwal, the 75-odd-year-old man, waiting to receive me and take me home. And he had just then lost his wife, who also figures in the book. And then he showed me everything. And that included a route map. I mean, those days you didn't have GPS or anything like that, Google Maps or anything. He had taken a map, and P.K. Mehta, he was the guru who comes across in the
California.
book. Yeah, he was at Berkeley. He was a professor at Berkeley, and a remarkable figure. So he had assigned him the job of creating a route map in consultation with War Sisters and others to reach New York UN office from the Independence Hall, where the American Declaration of Independence had been signed. So that was a symbolic march that they were doing in September of 1976 to protest against Indira Gandhi. And you may be surprised, now you may talk so much about human rights. This group, again, was the first to shift the paradigm of resistance from just a political resistance to making it a resistance about civil liberties and human rights. And where they get their inspiration from and who trains them. This is something that will amaze the audience, which is people who trained them included people like Homer Jack and Bayard Rustin and a lot of others. And particularly Bayard Rustin is somebody who's a great figure in American history because he taught Martin Luther King who Gandhi was. Martin Luther King, when the Montgomery bus strikes were happening, did not know who Gandhi was. But this man had already practiced Gandhian methods even when Gandhi was alive. In the jails of America, in the prisons of America, getting beaten up by bullies and all that, but not responding with violence. So he goes to Martin Luther King in Alabama, and rest is history, as they say in America.
How did these young men from India build this network of resistance?
That's because their initial effort is a failure. See, they are trying to protest in front of the embassy, they are trying to protest here and there, they are trying to write pamphlets, and they are trying to just work with the Indians abroad at that point of time. See, today we are about 4 million Indian Americans, and the diaspora size is that. But at that point of time, they were just 100,000. I mean, just about touching 100,000. And they were inspired by the work of another great character called J.J. Singh, who had worked in the 40s, just before independence. And who was this J.J. Singh? J.J. Singh was a person who had got the Loose Cellar Act passed by Harry Truman. And that enabled an Indian to become an American citizen or to get permanent residency. Without J.J. Singh, no Indian could have thought of becoming an American citizen or getting permanent residency there. So this man had started, when Lala Lajpat Rai was in America in the 20s, at that time he had started the India League of America, but it had gone, dead after he had left. But then he had revived it and had found that it was just a boring debating society, which he converted into action. And the New Yorker in 1951, New Yorker, I don't have to tell you how important it is to get written in the New Yorker. In 1951, gives him a 30-page profile and calls it one-man lobby. This man, with just 4,000 Indians in America at that time, just 4,000. There was, of course, a legal back case about the Thind case and all that. So he was fighting that. He gets senators, he gets Nobel laureates, he gets people like Pearl Buck, he gets future American presidents and future American first ladies, the Roosevelts, to be on his side, and they lobby. And this act is passed. So this IFT is drawing from that, and Hiremat has become the chairman of that organization.
Yeah.
And Hiremat is also chairman of Ideas. He has started Ideas. There's another Bangladeshis to say that, the borders were created in India, but those borders remained, absent in America, because the biggest supporter of IFT and IDS and all that at that time was one of the great architects who planned the biggest buildings in Chicago,
Fazlur Khan.
Fazlur Khan. And Fazlur Khan supports financially and backs a young man called S.R. Hiremat. We today just dismiss him as an RTI activist in Karnataka. But S.R. Hiremat, at that time in America, was one of the top corporate professionals who was who used to drive a sports car. I say sports car because that should tell you the kind of money that he was making. And he was married to an American wife called Mavis Sigwalt. So that is the kind of energy that they build, and they, in spite of it, they realize that they are not successful. They want to protest, but they're not successful. So they realize that it is not important to just address Indian Americans, but to build a network among Americans, the larger thing. So that is when they start reaching out, and they use one magical name, M.K. Gandhi. So Gandhi and JP. See, JP is again like I spoke about Deve Gowda earlier. But JP is made to look like some confused man in Indian history. But you forget that JP himself had studied in America for 9 years and had top-class degrees in Ohio, Berkeley, Wisconsin, and other places. And this man was also someone who was the chairman of the War Resisters International in London. And his network was brilliant. He was such a handsome man in the pubs of, Wisconsin or Ohio. The young girls had given him a nickname. He was so handsome. That was JP. And people did not even recognize all this. And they made it look like he was just a small character who was just waiting to sort of be. So the Congress party or the Congress lobby or the kind of, the whole lobby system or the power system that operated made everybody look small. How was that possible that JP was an idiot? It was not true at all. So the socialists of the time, or JP, or Achut Patwardhan, or Madhulima stalwarts among the socialists. The Congress made everybody look like a pappu. In fact, that was the kind of line that was used about JP. Anybody who has read the Bimal Prasad volumes, collected volumes of JP, we cannot dismiss JP so easily. JP, if you look at the kind of exchange he had with Nehru, and mind you, JP, until he started this 74 movement, was someone who had always backed Indira Gandhi in her outreach during the Bangladesh war. In the Kashmir problem. So as long as he was playing along, he was a great man. He was a mentor. But the moment he started asking questions, you created a canard. So the whole system of the Congress building canard against non-congressmen is something that we have to be very careful. It's what the current establishment probably has learned the best from the Congress. The propaganda model.
What was the impact that this group of protesters, they were thousands of miles away from India, they're in America, but as you've written, they did have a significant impact.
Yes.
Indira Gandhi was following what they were up to.
Yes.
But from your own, in your own way, if you can explain what kind of impact they were having.
See, the impact is very clear. Again, I am not trying to infer an impact. I am only, as a historian, I would only go by what is written, what is there as evidence. If you study the papers of T.N. Kaul, who was India's ambassador to the United States at that time, and he was a very interesting man. He did not trust anybody reporting him properly. So what he would do is, he would go to every meeting, press the tape recorder and say, I am recording what I am speaking, and get transcripts of that made and preserve it. And I was very lucky because those transcripts was what revealed him. So during the emergency, he unleashes a propaganda tour to defend Indira Gandhi and the emergency across America. And the only people
counter the IFD.
Counter the IFD, not IFD initially. IFD he initially dismisses as people washing dirty linen in public. In fact, much later the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Evening Standard write an editorial with the same headline. The dirty, I've quoted that. So this man initially does not think that they are important to be counted, he dismisses. But slowly, when these people start accessing the American media, just imagine Hiremat being on PBS 60 Minutes. It's unimaginable, right? Yeah. And Anand Kumar being on some of the best radio programs. And why this happened was, until December of 1975, America did not take the emergency seriously. They thought it was an action that was necessary because there was a bit of anarchy being spread. But once Indira Gandhi postpones the elections, then the Ford establishment awakens and they realize that she's up to something very big. So that is when the American press starts taking the IFD importantly. And then they also sort of realize that these people are constructing not a violent resistance. I have to emphasize this because there is also a left movement in America of Indians, extreme left, people who are enamored by Naxalbari movement. People who are swearing by the CPI-ML, Marxist-Leninist movement. And the pressure is from them, not from the RSS or the right wing, because they don't have a footprint in America that is so big as it is today. So there is pressure and Americans are watching. And when Anand Patwardhan and others are on the other side, they have an organization called IPANA in Canada. They are trying to convert students in campuses. And they are saying that this is a great movement because this lady has suspended democracy and we should convert it into a revolutionary movement and bring revolution in India, not restore democracy. But these people are trying to restore democracy. That is what America is fighting the Cold War. See, look at the historical circumstances of all of it. And America thinks that anything that is democracy has to be supported. So the Ford establishment does not come into direct contact with IFD, but the American press starts recognizing their work. You should look at the coverage in Washington Post or New York Times. It's unbelievable that these bunch of youngsters were getting that kind of coverage. And T.N. Kaul suddenly realizes that the table has turned. And that is when he starts writing to Indira Gandhi, the confidential papers. If you see, he starts speaking about a guy called Subramaniam Swamy who's creating mischief. He starts writing about S.R. Hiremat creating mischief. Then he recommends that their passports are impounded. All passports are impounded. Then Ram Jethmalani reaches America and seeks asylum. It is S.R. Hiremat and another great character called Sri Kumar Podar who take him and get him asylum in America. Can you believe it? And Jethmalani stays in Hiremat's home for some time.
Wow. And
so he is giving them legal counsel. Then in India there is a a lot of Tarkunde and others who are supporting and giving them a very, very sane advice on what they should be doing. And then Anand Kumar's scholarship is taken away, and that's a big blow. So the university community, today if you look at America, Columbia or Princeton, they're all completely surrendering to what Trump has been telling them. But those days, the University of Chicago stands up in support of Anand Kumar and creates a committee in defense of Anand Kumar. And Anand Kumar was a JNU president who had gone to America to study sociology and had defeated a little known person called Prakash Karat at JNU. This is the history. So this man has landed up there and his scholarship has been taken away. So he is working as a guard, making his ends meet. And Chicago University waives his tuition fee. And that is, and New York Times is writing about it. And students and American students.
And his family is being penalized
here back in India. His father dies because of that kind of
three
pressure.
sisters
His
are
sister
all
Anjana and others are jailed because he's protesting in America. But what is the CPI doing in JNU? They are saying, this was there till 15 days back when I spoke in JNU on the same book. You know what they spread about Anand Kumar? Anand Kumar compromised with Indira Gandhi, took a fellowship and went away to America, abandoning his fight against emergency and the JP movement. This was the canard that was spread, and that held true till the last 15. People in JNU were surprised when I told them this was the kind of torture the man went through. And he was the one who was touring America, Hiremat and Podar, Sri Kumar Podar. And Sri Kumar Podar is a fascinating character because again, he is controlling the American magazine subscriptions. He is a czar of American magazine subscriptions and he is financing the movement partially. Hiremat is rich. He is partially financing the movement. And they sent Anand Kumar on a tour across American cities and universities to create awareness on the emergency. So T.N. Cowell is obviously very disturbed about it. And then he starts writing to Indira Gandhi. They start hitting out. They take away their passports. They take away their scholarship. And a lot of other things are done to their relatives in India. But they still withstand all of that. So that is, and they withstand it with great dignity. They don't, for instance, the one thing I should tell you, they don't use one bad phrase against Indira Gandhi. In fact, it is not the George Fernandez method of countering Indira Gandhi. They say that Indira Gandhi or speaking ill against her is not our method. We have to resist this in a principled fashion.
It's a Gandhian
socialist satyagraha kind of movement, civil to and backed by the civil rights movement in America, which Bayard Rustin, the guru of Martin Luther King, is helping them. And he writes a brilliant letter to Indira Gandhi. And not just that, there is another character called Horace Alexander. I'll be failing in my duty if I don't speak about Horace Alexander.
Yeah.
Horace Alexander has settled down in Pendle Hill or Swarthmore area, and he was a Quaker by faith. And he was a friend of Motilal Nehru and the Gandhi family. And he has taught Indira Gandhi to watch birds, ornithological interest he had created in her. And there was a Delhi bird club and he was the chairman and she was a member as a young girl. That is the relationship between him and the Nehru Gandhi family. And he has also been Nehru's, finding a publisher for Discovery of India, correcting his proofs, arguing for his royalty with publishers. He's that kind of a person and a Quaker. And someone who befriends Gandhi in the 20s when he goes to the Round Table Conference. That is Horace Alexander. And Horace Alexander is furious that the freedom movement of Mahatma Gandhi has been turned upside down by Indira Gandhi. But he cautions these people. He says, we will give her a patient hearing. So he sends a delegation of Quakers, which is led by a great professor called Joseph Elder, who was at the Wisconsin-Madison University. And they come, they speak to this lady, all that. They go back and report. And then they decide that she is going the wrong way, and they build this resistance. There are the Willoughbys who are fighting. They are again the great Quakers, Lillian Willoughby and the husband Willoughby. So they build this resistance. So it's important, Vikhar, that it's not just a kind of ruffian kind of protest that was happening. Leela for Kabir has also, George's wife has also reached America at that time. She is in Charlottesville with her brother because she has to escape Indira Gandhi. So she has also reached there. All of this is happening in America. So this is fascinating to watch how these things happen.
No, I mean, it's great. I mean, that you've sort of excavated this bit of unknown history. For me, I mean, the role of Hiremat is very fascinating because all of us know him. All of us became aware of him, many of us rather, became aware of him only from 2008, 2009 onwards. When his name started figuring as
the mining
in the mining scandal. I mean, as the opponent of the mining scandal, as someone who was passionately and making some serious allegations and revelations, and he followed it up in the High Court and Supreme Court as well.
What he had given up for that life was amazing, because you have to see his old Chicago residence. He owned it, boss, at that time. It is amazing kind of sacrifice. And where did it all come from? And they all come back. I start the book with the American dream of all these people. He's a first class plus throughout. He's got a first rank in SSLC. And he's in some Bijapur school. And that school is also where B.D. Jatti
He grew up in a lot of poverty.
He didn't have a chappal to wear until he had finished his SSLC. He buys a chappal from the money that he gets after he's got the first rank in SSLC. You know, that kind of poverty. His father is dead when he is 4 years old. You know, that, and going to America, big sheer meritocracy, merit. And then the others reach from other corners of India. They all have different backgrounds, and they all have a common purpose in America. So for me, it's not a book against Indira Gandhi. It's not a book on just emergency. For me, you asked me about the method and methodology. For me, what was more important was to understand what is the structure of this idealism? What is the structure of the resistance? You know, we speak about all kinds of resistance. You are seeing one resistance happening today in Bangalore where Rahul Gandhi is trying to throw muck at the government with the electoral rolls. But what was this? What is it that is happening here? So those are the larger questions which make, I think, a narrative far more interesting, far more important than just limited questions. क्या मुझे इंदिरा गांधी को टोकना है क्या? Should I just pull her down the pedestal? Is that my limited purpose? No. Am I having to play into the hands of the BJP by just doing that?
No, certainly.
But for a writer, that is not important at all. A story is a story.
Of course.
And as journalists, you and I, you know, we don't want to write boring stuff at all.
At some point, you described yourself as a historian. through this longish response.
I don't want that. I don't want that heavy thing on me.
So are you a journalist or a historian, or is it a very naive question to pose? Or are you someone who just chases a story to its logical end?
See, I mean, I don't mind if I'm called a historian by a friend like you or others call me. In fact, I was introduced day before yesterday at the Jindal University as a contemporary historian. But I don't want to carry those things because, see, any discipline, except journalism perhaps, comes with a very rigid kind of frame. So if you call yourself a historian, then they will start saying, oh, but he does not do it like this, which was said by this fellow in 17th century. Then 19th century they did this, he doesn't do it that way. So they start putting you in a box and trying to dispute that label. I don't want to be called anything. I want my books to sell because I make a living out of my writing.
You want your books to be read.
I want my books to be read. That's another
which automatically means that they'll sell.
Yeah. So whether it's history or journalism or storytelling or what I learned from my father or from others like you, it's a culmination of a lot of things which if you want to call history, because I use archives and I use evidence and I look at a lot of things thoroughly, I'm very happy with that, but that's not the only thing that I want to be known as. Probably I'll be happy the day if I'll be described as some good writer.
That's very fundamental, because as I read out, your prose is beautiful, mellifluent.
Thank you.
It's I think the when I write something, for me, what's sort of compelling me to write, or when I think about style, is primarily, okay, I want it to be easy for the reader. I'm not dumbing it down.
Yes. Yes.
I'm not dumbing it down, but it should be sufficiently well written and alluring enough that the writer also makes a little bit of an effort to read it from beginning to end, that there is a structure to it.
That's right.
And certainly with your books, there is a great effort at structuring it.
It's also about your personal discipline. You know, you wear a certain kind of dress, you wear a certain kind of color, you wear a certain kind of frame. I mean, it's also personal. You know, how you write your book is also how you live your life. It's also how you want to look. You know, you wear, I mean, today I've worn a black shirt. And I want to present myself in a certain way. And I mean, I want to look thin, probably don't want to show my tummy. So this is all the adjustments that writers make when they write. So that's all. You know, I don't want to, I mean, I have studied, academically I have studied literature. Academically I have studied subaltern history or linguistics or whatever, but all of that was in the past, you know, I mean, 90s. So I don't remember anything of that. I studied literary theory, and I used to be very pretentious because I was one of the early ones trying to understand Foucault and Derrida in a literature.
And you also know French.
Yeah, a bit of it. I mean, very rusty one though. So those pretensions is what journalism stripped me. Vinod Mehta would not publish a single page of mine if I had been pretentious. But I wrote the most in Outlook because I have this record that I am the only one, as long as I was there, published every single week. So journalism gave you a certain discipline, and journalism also taught you that if you don't have a unique take, you will not get into the thing. It is premium space. It's premium real estate. If you want space in the magazine, you better bring something new to the table. So that kind of pressure week on week for 10 years is something that is, you know, a blessing. Someone like a Hari Kumar in Bangalore, you know, someone more closer, Deccan Herald, who on earth would send a 25-year-old in 1996 to go and interview Derrida in Delhi? He was making his first visit, and published 2 full pages in the Deccan Herald of those days. So there is a magnanimity and generosity of even someone who was editing you, who said that, okay, you know, let's try out a bit of this. So there are lots of things come together for a writer.
Yeah. And, you know, through all the time I've known you, this will be the last question. So a brief answer. You are one of the few people, or perhaps the only one, who often brings in your mentor's role in your works, right? I mean, you very consciously.
Yeah.
Can you talk about this, your mentors, and how they've informed your work?
I mean, my father taught me the greatest humanity. I mean, he said, writing is more important, living is more important than writing. And I don't think there was another person who could bring such kind of empathy and compassion into your whole worldview other than my father. But then I was lucky to get, I mentioned Hari Kumar, I mentioned Vinod Mehta, but one of my greatest teachers was Jeremy Seabrook, to whom I dedicated my second book. And, you know, when you are nobody without your teachers, you're nobody without, peers like you put pressure. I mean, I was always watching my back. What is Vikhar writing in Frontline, which I have not written? There's that intense competition of good peers like you. So you're all mentors. You're all mentors in different ways. And also, you know, there's a lovely poem in Kannada of G.S. Shurudrappa, which I think you've used it somewhere in my Devegowda book, in my acknowledgements. It speaks about Enitu Janmadali, I've forgotten the exact lines. Enitu Janmadali, what? Nanu Runiyo, right? Enitu Jeevarige now. So that indebtedness, if you don't have that indebtedness, I see Professor Nagarajaya sitting here. He was my father's teacher. My father wouldn't have been that without him. So there are lots of such things which come together. So that indebtedness, if a writer forgets, I think he forgets a lot of things.
Sugata, it was. I have a few more questions, but we can continue to talk. Right, I'm enjoying this conversation, and I just, if you, I was reading a great historian's comments. Of perhaps of Muhammad Qasim Farishta, the great 16th century historian. So, what he intended, he writes in the introduction of his great history. The author's fervent hope is that these simple and unadorned annals, founded on truth but devoid of all pretension to elegancy of style or beauty of composition. He was being extremely modest, comparing himself to the Persian poets of the 16th century, may be acceptable to the prince to whom they are dedicated, and that the contents of these volumes may be disseminated far and wide over the regions of the earth. So that is the hope with your books as well.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure having this conversation. Thank you for this opportunity, Sugata.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vikhar, and you've always been generous, and you've yet again been generous. I'm very, very grateful to this conversation and for this forum. Thank you.